Direct News TV. June 29, 2023. France police shooting live, marchers for killed teen tear-gassed. Police throw tear gas at marchers protesting the death of Nahel M., a 17-year-old of North African descent who was killed by a police officer on Tuesday. Maunia, the mother of the teenager, is leading the tribute march of thousands in the Paris suburb of Nanterre, where he was killed. French policeman charged, remanded in custody, prosecutors. A French policeman has been charged and remanded in custody ahead of trial over the killing of a teenager at point-blank range which sparked nationwide protests, prosecutors have said. The investigating magistrate has charged the policeman with voluntary homicide and placed him in provisional detention over Tuesday's incident, the regional prosecutors said in a statement. Nahel's death has fed long-standing complaints of police violence, racism within low-income suburbs, AJ correspondent. The death of a 17-year-old in a Paris suburb has fed long-standing complaints of police violence and systemic racism inside law enforcement agencies from rights groups and within the low-income, racially mixed suburbs that ring major cities in France, Al Jazeera's Natasha Butler reports. Protests are erupting against what, many say, has become a systematic zero-tolerance policy carried out by French police, especially against those from poor and minority communities, she said from the district of Nanterre on the western outskirts of Paris. Tuesday's killing was the third fatal shooting during traffic stops in France so far in 2023, down from a record 13 last year, a spokesperson for the national police said. There were 3 such killings in 2021 and 2 in 2020, according to a Reuters tally, which shows the majority of victims since 2017 were black or of Arab origin. Increase in police murders under Macron regime, activist. Activists say that punishing the one policeman who killed a teenager in a Paris suburb this week will not end police violence, which has increased in the last few years. For 20 years, we have been saying the problem is not 1 or 2 cops who are problematic. It's a problem of systemic violence inside the police. The police unions and the police in general, it's a state within a state, said Ian B., founder and spokesman for the anti-police violence collective known as Let's Disarm Them. We cannot say that it's one policeman responsible for this. We have had a huge increase in violence in several years, and especially under the Macron regime. We have a huge increase in police murders. We went from 20 to 25 murders every year and now, we are at 30 to 35 a year, he told Al Jazeera from Lyon, France. March ends with tear gas lobbed by police on families, children, AJ correspondent. Police firing tear gas at marchers was shocking, and police handled the protest in the wrong way, marchers have told Al Jazeera's Natasha Butler, reporting from Nanterre, a Paris suburb where a teenager was killed by police. It was shocking because there were families and young children, and people were here to be peaceful. Then we saw unrest and violence, some people were smashing up buildings. We saw fires being lit. There is debris because there were some clashes between some protesters and police, she said. It didn't have to be like that, say some people, because it was a peaceful march. It was a moment of commemoration. It shouldn't have ended that way, but people were so frustrated and furious, and that anger boiled over. Many are saying the police handled the end of that commemoration the wrong way. And that's the sort of thing that happens over and again, they say. Nahel was not evil or a hooligan, neighbor. Neighbors marching for justice for Nahel M., who was shot dead by police in a Paris suburb, spoke of a young man who was very kind, not evil or a hooligan, and should not have been shot over a traffic infraction. He is a young man, he is very kind, he is not evil or a hooligan. What the media are saying about him is not true. His mom raised him well. The young man left us for nothing, said Mohammed Jacobi, a neighbor of the victim's family. We are not contradicting the state. We are not contradicting the legal or police procedure. Yes, he was driving a car without a license, he tried to flee but he should not be killed. Police fire tear gas at marchers in Nanterre. French police have fired tear gas at protesters marching outside Paris to remember a teen killed at point-blank range by an officer this week. Some protesters began throwing projectiles at police outside the main local administration building in the Paris suburb of Nanterre, and security forces then dispersed the protest by firing tear gas. Nanterre is where 17-year-old Nahel M. was shot to death. Macron appeals for calm after protests. French President Emmanuel Macron has appealed for calm after unrest over the killing of a teenager by police in a Paris suburb. Clearly, the emotion that comes with the death of a young man calls for contemplation and calm, and it's what the government has constantly called for. I think this is what should continue to guide the next hours and the tributes. It's been the subject of reactions, presumably attempts to change what's happened, and the last hours have been marked by violent scenes at police stations but also schools and town halls. It's absolutely unjustifiable. Large crowds in Nanterre demanding justice for killed teen. Large crowds join march in Nanterre, a Paris suburb, for Nahel M., a 17-year-old teenager killed by a French police officer during a traffic stop incident. 180 arrests made in second night of unrest, Interior Minister. French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin says police made 180 arrests during a second night of unrest as public anger spills onto the streets in towns and cities across the country. The unrest in the French capital and other cities came 2 days after a 17-year-old was shot dead by a police officer in Nanterre, just outside Paris. Darmanin was speaking from the suburbs of the northern French city of Lille, where the town hall was set on fire on Wednesday night. At Nanterre March, people rail against French police impunity. At a march in Nanterre in memory of Nahel, participants have railed against what they perceived as a culture of police impunity and a failure to reform law enforcement in a country that has experienced waves of rioting and protests against police conduct. "We demand that the judiciary does its job, otherwise we'll do it our way," a neighbor of Nahel's family told Reuters at the march. Thousands thronged the streets. Riding atop a flatbed truck, the teenager's mother waved to the crowd wearing a white t-shirt reading, "Justice for Nahel," with the date of his death below. Dramatic increase in lethal shootings over traffic violations in last 18 months. Tuesday's lethal shooting was the third of its kind in France during 2023. In 2022, a record 13 people were killed after not complying with a traffic stop, according to a police spokesperson. There were 3 such killings in 2021 and 2 in 2020, none in 2019, and 6 in both 2018 and 2017, according to a Reuters news agency tally, which shows most victims since 2017 were black or of Arab origin. France's human rights ombudsman opened an inquiry into the death on Tuesday, the 6th such inquiry into similar incidents in 2022 and 2023. A march in tribute to Nahel M. is underway in Nanterre. More than 1,000 people have begun a march in Nanterre as a way to pay tribute to Nahel M. The teenager's mother is among the crowd wearing a white t-shirt which reads, "Justice pour Nahel, justice for Nahel." Nahel's friends and family, as well as local and national government officials, are reported to be among those joining the peaceful march. French newspaper Le Monde reported that mediators wearing red t-shirts are present and are instructing participants to remain calm. Nothing justifies the violence, PM Borne. Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne has called for appeasement after last night's protests as she dismissed the idea of declaring a state of emergency in the country, adding that it was important to avoid any escalation. She addressed the media at Garges-les-Gonesse, in Val d'Oise, located in the northern suburbs of Paris, where buildings were damaged on Wednesday night. "The death of young Nahel is a tragedy, and I understand the emotion it triggers," she said, later adding that nothing justifies the violence that occurred that Wednesday night. "The police are shielded from accountability in France," activist. The shooting of Nahel M. has reignited a debate in France about police tactics amid long-standing criticism from rights groups about the treatment of people in low-income suburbs, particularly ethnic minorities. Civil rights activist Yasser Louadi told Al Jazeera, what does not surprise us at all is the speed at which the talking points of the police were immediately relayed by the mainstream media in France. Thank God there was a video that emerged online contradicting the official version of the police, pushing the government to react. At the same time, we should not forget to note how Macron was quick to react to the outburst of violence last night. He called the anger unjustifiable. The police are shielded from accountability in France. There is no transparency. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.